So my name's Joe Cheal, Imaginarium. The session this morning is managing performance and well-being, both online and on site, just to be all-inclusive of all possibilities there. And that's partly because obviously we have been mainly online, depending on what industry you're in or where you're at. But so therefore that managing online, managing performance online, there's an extra step that's required, which I think some managers have struggled with, and therefore kind of it's all gone a bit weird in terms of managing performance. But obviously remembering that we are going to be back on site as well. One of the things, so from a well-being perspective, obviously I think our next phase for some people is going to be the anxiety of going back into an environment, which I know has been covered, I think, on other sessions too. What I wanted to do, because we've only got the 90 minutes, is really zoom in on the performance and well-being bit, because what I'm curious about there is we're often talking as if it's like a balance between those things. It's like the organizational needs. The organization needs people to perform, to deliver, you know, because that's what they're employed to do. That's what they're paid to do. But on the other hand, the teams and the individuals themselves also have their own needs and expectations, particularly now at the moment around well-being, motivation, mental health, welfare, etc. So for a manager, that is to some extent a balancing act, to keep people happy and to keep the company happy as well, keep the organization happy. And sometimes that leads, this is sort of goes beyond the scope of this session, but can lead to just sort of the weirdest ongoing dilemmas. You know, like the one I use quite a bit is, what if you've got somebody who comes to you, if you're a manager, you've got somebody comes to you at, I don't know, 11 o'clock one day and said, oh, I've got a dentist appointment this afternoon for a checkup, you know, at 3 o'clock, so I'm going to need to leave about 2. Well, it's not an emergency, but now you've got the individual's welfare, but actually they're being paid for that time. Does that make, and that's just, I know it's a real simple day-to-day dilemma, but actually that is the very nature of managing people. It's not just about, you'll also have your own objectives and things to do. You know, you've got your own job to do as well at the same time. And there's all these people kind of going, oh, I need to do this, oh, I've got that. And that, as I say, that creates its own interesting dilemmas. However, what I want to look at here is going beyond this balancing act to actually, well, let's look at both and. Because the reality is, if somebody is performing to reasonable requests and demands, and they're performing and delivering, the likelihood is they're going to feel reasonable about that and pretty okay about it, if not good about that anyway. And if people are feeling motivated and their well-being is taken care of, then they're more likely to perform. Does that make sense? So actually there's a positive spiral potentially in this, as well as the inevitable negative spiral. I'm just setting the scene here. What I would like to do is do a couple, or at least one, maybe one, a breakout, because I know from my own experience, you know, 90 minutes, it's quite nice to just have a moment. And as we do have enough people in the group as well, I think it might be nice just to kind of have at least one breakout session to be able to talk in smaller groups. I encourage you, I implore you to interrupt me at any point. If you have a question, of course you can raise the, you know, do the kind of little icon thing, or you can wave at me. If you're not on video, okay, fair enough. But obviously if you wave at me, I won't see that. Or just go on, just come off of mute and just interrupt me wherever I'm at. Okay, that's the deal. This is meant to, that's the kind of the interactivity bit. If you want to do a kind of question in the chat, that's okay. I might miss it. That's the only thing. So I like the conversation bit of this. Cool. I think the first bit, rather than do introductions all around the screen, if this is okay, because that may just kind of then take about 20 minutes and then we lose that time. What I'd like to do is actually get you almost immediately into some smaller groups. If you want to say hello to one another within the groups. But what I'm after here, given the topic, we've got performance, well-being, online, on site. What are some of the challenges or questions that you've got about that? So therefore we can kind of come back with any sort of, what are some of the key challenges from your experience? Either what have you experienced or what have you seen? Because what I want to try and do then is use the rest of the time to at least answer some of those questions if we can. So, okay, let's find out from you. Oh, got someone in the waiting room. There we go. Find out from you. So what were some of the either challenges, questions that came up?
So I've got a challenge with my
I know.
team working remotely who want to
Yes.
come back in the office, but we don't yet have a structured plan in terms of how people can do that.
Okay, so people want to come back, but there's not the plan is not yet in place, and presumably the building is not ready. Is that?
Well, I'm working in the building, so
Ah,
some of it is absolutely managing hygiene on site,
yeah.
and the complexity of doing that across our organisation, because we have
Yes.
people who are in,
Yeah.
and at the moment it's easier to manage by leaving some people out.
Right. In out, shake it all about. Okay, so I'm going to put here want to come back. With the implication that it may not be ready. By the way, if that's too small, if you click on speaker view, you can then should be able to read it. Okay. By the way, just whilst you were in your breakout room, I was just sitting here minding my own business, and then it's kind of interesting what the unconscious mind does. And I was just sitting there, and then I started singing to myself, as I do, singing Tiger Feet for some strange reason. And then I suddenly remembered, oh, this is being recorded, so I'm going to have to edit that bit out before I send it over to you, Sally. It's just this sort of 5 minutes of Joe going do 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 do. Anywho,
my 2-year-old's favourite song. My 2-year-old is obsessed by that song.
It's a good song. It's a good song. Let's face it.
Leave it in, Joe.
Okay. What else? What other challenges did you have, or kind of talk about? Questions?
We talked about the mental health, as in like the difficulty in keeping track or understanding what staff is going through when you don't see them on a daily basis and can't kind of pick up the signs necessarily as easily as or as obvious that you might do if you see someone on a daily basis.
Yes. Yeah. Fair dues. Absolutely. And by the way, I can't remember whether I put this in the handout or not, but I kind of encourage, if as a manager, particularly obviously at the beginning of a crisis, but even now, to have 2 separate types of meetings with individuals. So you have your team meetings, and actually this is the same with team meetings as well. You have your performance meeting, which is to talk about where are you up to, what needs to happen, what are you delivering, what have you been working on. But there's also a separate conversation at a separate time for how are you doing. Now that's going to partly depend on personality styles, because there's some people that don't want to, they're not fussed about that conversation. So I'm fine, stop hassling me. Whereas they're going to be the other end of that spectrum, are just like, oh, somebody please talk to me. So you've got to weigh that one up. So if someone doesn't want the kind of how you doing chat, then so be it, but you keep an eye on them in the team meetings and the performance meetings. But same with team meetings. Team meetings, you have performance related meetings about deliverable, delivering, and then you have your lunchtime social or your break time social kind of idea, to separate those things out so that one doesn't, I think particularly the delivery, we've got to do X, Y, Z. If that starts getting kind of, I was going to say infiltrated, I don't know if that's the right word, with kind of like, oh, a funny thing happened to me, or my dog was in the garden, and it's some people are just like, oh, seriously, stop it, can we just get on with this meeting? So it's just to try and help with all cases. But yes, obviously,
Joe, it's the water cooler chats, the water cooler or the coffee room chats.
Yeah,
that's
yes.
That's
so what you have to do therefore is take your laptop to the sink, I guess, or to your own little kitchen, to your kitchen area. Just stand by the kettle. Just have it there that way. That's cool. Yes, absolutely. That's what some people miss. Again, this is what's sort of slightly beyond the scope of this session, is different personality styles. But of course this kicks in, but you've got some people who are delighted about working from home. They love it. I can get on with stuff. It's brilliant. And then there's going to be other people that are just, they miss that coming into the office environment, that kind of like, hey, how you doing? Hiya. Oh, what are you like? Coffee, did you say? Oh, go on then. Yeah, they miss all of that aspect of it. And those, I guess, Simon, are some of the people that want to come back, not just from a social perspective, interpersonal perspective, I'm sure from a work perspective too. But yes, okay, cool. So definitely, by the way, if you are going to, as a manager, if you are going to have introduce those conversations of the how are you doing as opposed to what are you doing, let people know that's what you're going to do. Because I've heard of some managers saying, oh, I tried that, and like people just thought I was chasing them to get the job done. So it's like you need to communicate with them what I'm going to be doing from this point onwards. It's what's called meta communication. It's the communication about the communication. This is how I'm going to be, so once a week we'll still continue our performance conversations or our just deliverables, etc. conversations. But what I'd also do is like to check in with you, just to see how you're doing as well as a separate meeting. Let people know that's what you're going to do. What else?
Joe, it's Nas.
NASA, go on.
Yeah, I don't want to sound like a real doom monger, but I think we're in a slightly quasi position. I mean, with furlough, business interruption loans, and bounce back loans, the reality I think for a lot of businesses will be come the time that they actually have to repay these loans, and they have to start actually putting in place financial policies to repay the significant funds that they've received, and that in itself will have a massive knock-on effect in terms of people's mental well-being, because come the 31st of October, furlough will end. Come September, no one will be able to apply for business interruption loans, and come November, no one will be able to apply for bounce back loans, and all the grants that have been dished out will cease. So I think we're although greeting people back into the office or trying to get people back into the office, I think there's a longer term issue in terms of well-being, staff management, and also redundancies, and how there's going to be managed and how they're actually going to be put in place. Because a lot of business owners and directors are only looking, in the work I'm doing, are only looking until the end of the year.
Yeah. So there's a bigger picture context to this, and if we were doing kind of more about business leadership, etc., that would be a rabbit hole that we could go forward on. But you're absolutely right there, Nas, because that is a context. So one of the things, this is going to sound really obvious to some extent, however, this is something if ever I'm doing running training with or facilitating groups like managers, whether they're first line, middle management, or senior management, just as a reminder. And can I just double check, is that coming out? Yes, that's okay. So there's let's say the manager, and then they've got the organization who have needs and expectations of them. And then they've also got the team, and now we're also focusing even more so on the individuals as well. So that's individuals within the team also have needs and expectations of the manager. Those don't always match up, hence the balancing act. What you've also got, by the way, is you're going to have potentially, you could have customers, external customers, internal customers, other departments, etc. So you've got like these arrows coming in from all angles. That's going to create a whole series of tensions. That's a very obvious model, but it's just to contextualize. Okay, look, this is the reality. Let's not be fantasy driven here about what should be or could be. This is the reality. As a manager, you're always going to have the factors that drive from the organization, and that could be a struggling organization as well, but you've also trying to meet the needs. I kind of developing a model which is a big thing at the moment, which is needs-based leadership, which is how do you kind of deliver to the needs of the organization, the people, the customers, internal customers, etc. But what we're focusing primarily on for this small session is more this bit here in terms of delivering for the performance. One thing I'm going to pick up on, and it's just this difference between kind of remote or online managing versus the on-site, and that is the round performance. And it's like there's an extra step, because when everyone's in the office, everything's ticking along, and we're all kind of as we used to be once upon a time. It's like everybody kind of, okay, you've got a job description, that's what you're delivering to, you work, you come in and do X amount of hours, and that's kind of what you're paid to do, as long as you're pretty much online, kind of delivering to your job description, your standards and your objectives, etc. That's great. However, the working from home thing has shifted all of that and changed all of that, because you've got different people in very different circumstances. So not only from a psychological perspective, so we just mentioned mental health, etc., We've also got, some people maybe have got the flu. Some people are caring for someone else who's got the flu. Some people have been homeschooling and probably are still to some extent. I don't know whether it's home holidaying now. I don't know how that works. But it's, and then also where they're working as well. They're working, are they kind of at the kitchen table where everything's going on around them? Are they sharing broadband? Are they, there's just so many factors, variables. I've listed a few of them in the handout, just to kind of get you thinking. So now it's more about every single individual. It's almost like negotiating the performance or standards and or deliverables, whatever you choose to call it. It's about negotiating that with each individual depending on their situation. In HR terminology, we talk about reasonable adjustments, which is like a classic, a kind of like a favorite phrase in HR. But that's so true right now. That would be normally in the kind of on-site, if somebody's having a problem, an issue, like work issues at home or got problems at home, you do what you can to support them whilst they're still coming in and doing as many hours as they can, etc. However, we are pretty much everybody's in this space of reasonable adjustments right now. Does that make sense? So, that's the first thing that has to be negotiated to be able to compare. Okay, where are you? How are you doing? How is your performance? But it's more now, not about the time, it's more about output. Because different people can't work 9 till 5. I mean, if you're in a service role, then that may be a prerequisite and you have to kind of just put your kids to one side. I don't know how that works, but it's more about now it's like, what can you deliver each week, for example, on an ongoing basis. And that's what you agree with the individual. Now you're reviewing against something. So you've got to be able to review against something tangible, measurable, if you're going to manage performance. Does that make sense? Otherwise, if you're trying to relate to the original job description and like you haven't done your hours this week, it's just not going to work that way. So that's the extra step with the online bit. Set the flag. Yes.
I think NASA's got a very interesting point though about managing people while they're going to be watching people increasingly being made unemployed around them.
Yep.
And living and trying to what are you going to do with that level of uncertainty, which is unparalleled in my work life.
Yeah.
And I think the next 6 months, NASA's absolutely right, it's going to be a bloody bloodbath out there. So how we can support managers to maintain morale as so many people are going to be affected, I don't know quite where to start on that one.
Yeah, Joe, that was something we actually mentioned in our tete-a-tete, if you like, which was the issues of, if you want to talk to people about mental health or how they're doing and all of that sort of thing, more and more, and I agree with Nas, is this, we see increasing redundancies. People are going to be less and less open because they don't want to be the one that's selected. And I think that is something that we need to be very, very aware of. The people that would normally come to you and say, oh, I've got a real problem with this, and, my mother-in-law this, and da-da-da-da-da-da. They're not going to be that. And particularly those with, those of us that are older, if you like, we're comfortable in as much as we may have paid our mortgages off and the kids are away. But you've got a group of people who've got serious responsibilities, mortgages, kids, schooling, all sorts of things. And they are going to become more and more introverted when it comes to talking about how they really feel, because they don't want to be seen as a weak link. And I think that is a danger that previously I've managed remote teams for years. Yeah. You didn't have that. They were task orientated and they weren't afraid to say, actually, you're driving me around the twist because this is taking me 10 hours instead of 5. But I think on the mental health side, I think that's going to become a real problem. People aren't going to be as honest about how they're feeling and how they're coping because they're worried about redundancy.
The two things that go through my mind at that point. Number one, when we talk about bigger picture context, which is, and that's what Nas was talking about, etc., and unprecedented, of course, and the uncertainty aspect is like, well, what is, as a manager, you are kind of that space in between. That's the kind of the point of this. You are endeavoring to work with your team within that environment, with what's going on. The team are going to be affected by the outside world as the organization is going to be affected by the outside world as well. But first thing I have is, what support are you getting as a manager? What support is coming from the organization? What are you being told? Even if it's just like, look, this is a way to deal with it. Are you getting any training, for example? Even that, just like what's going on? How supportive is the organisation being? Next one is over that period, over time, how much rapport have you got with your team? What relationship do you have with your team? That I totally get that some people are going to start, well, I'm not going to say stuff, but where does that go? What happens as a result of that? But if you can't, as a manager, you can't reach through the screen, or if it's sort of in the real world, you can't kind of get into someone's head and start mucking around with that. You can only provide a space for that person to talk to you, and that's going to be a trust factor as much as anything else. But the point is, we can't change what could be coming, but we can. The thing about uncertainty is an important one. This is a quick side track. So there are some other things I really want to share with you as well, but let's just do a quick sidetrack with that. There's two things. One is uncertainty, the other is ambiguity, and that's something I've been kind of banging on about right from the beginning of all of this, and it happens to be a fascination area of mine. So first of all, we've got uncertainty was mentioned, which is where we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know where things are going. And so morale begins to drop because people feel uncertain, doubt, confidence begins to get knocked, as well as motivation. Now, this is on one hand simplistic, but it's not just about practicality. It is a psychological tool as much as anything else. And it's the idea of, okay, as a team, it could be with an individual as well, but you can do this with an individual as a coaching process, or with a team. It's just going, okay, look, there's a lot of we don't know coming up, in the next 6 months, the next year, we don't know. However, we are generally intelligent enough to be able to predict what are some of the key likelihoods. Worst case scenarios through to best case scenarios. What are the kind of various things that could happen? And that could be we thrive, through to this business kind of disappears basically, and we're all kind of out of it. So this is not to depress people, but what you do with that is, okay, then you're looking at if then. So if it's the first one, then what would we do? If that was the case, what would we do? Also, what are the opportunities? Does any opportunities arise as a result of that thinking of if this is the situation? So it becomes almost scenario planning, contingency planning. When you get through to the kind of the more unpleasant ones, the worst case scenarios, it's like, as a manager, if this business goes down, I can't change that. We can't change that. What I will do as a manager, I will do whatever I can to support you and help you in next steps, whatever that is. Let's stay in contact. If the organization is providing some kind of redundancy process and help with CVs and, et cetera, brilliant, we'll access that. We'll make sure that happens, or I will do my darndest to bring that. Employee assistance program, use that if you've got one in your organization, and just signpost people to things that are available, because I'm sure even with employee assistance program, there must be somebody within that framework that would help somebody with the idea of CVs and, like kind of opportunities. That doesn't take away the worry, but what it does, it starts to look at, rather than all this stuff buzzing around in my head of all this uncertainty and doubt and oh my God, putting it down on paper, first of all, disassociates it psychologically, puts it on paper. So it's like if you were a manager, you can put it on a flip chart, or on a, if you're sharing screen, you can kind of just put it on a table or, on a Word document, just type it up as you go. But what happens with this is whatever happens, we'll handle it. And that's the kind of the message, the reassurance. There's a book that was published, I think, either in the 1980s, I think, by Susan Jeffers, an American book, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. I tend to reference that because it's a particular phrase I like, which is whatever happens, I can handle it. And the reality is, everything that's happened in your life so far, whether it's exactly how you wanted to deal with it, you have dealt with it. Everything that's happened in your life so far, you've come out the other side of that. You're still here. You're on screen right here, right now. Whatever happens, you can handle it. So I think as a manager, you can't reassure people. You can't make promises about, no, it'll be fine. All the business will be all right. You can't do that. You're almost going to the individual level. It's resilience. Now we're into kind of the realms of resilience if you like, and well-being, which of course was part of the title of this session. But I think that's the core of it. Whatever happens, I can handle it. Whatever happens, we can handle it. Whatever happens, I will support you and help you in any way, shape, or form that I can. And that's all you can do as a manager. That was the frame of the day-to-day, managing as a manager, performance and well-being. You can't rock the world, you can't change the world, as it were. So helping people starting to think about next steps, encourage, if they've got an interview, great. If they're worried about the kind of whether the business is going to happen or not, support them in any way, shape, or form, I think, to continue that trust factor. That's uncertainty. That's not the only be all and end all. By the way, if you do go onto Imaginarium Dev article you will see actually the top thing on that page is a chapter, or part of a chapter anyway, from Solving Impossible Problems, which is the book that I wrote some years ago and then have done a second edition on. But there's actually part of a chapter about managing uncertainty in there as well, and I think that tool is mentioned. The other bit I mentioned there was managing ambiguity. Ambiguity is lack of clarity. So that would be, if we've got here, okay, manager, organization. So that's going to be presumably their manager above them. But what happens sometimes is it just feels like there's a gap or a void or a space in this direction, where there's just kind of either a lack of communication, lack of direction, lack of decision making, lack of action. And that's really tough for a manager, because it's almost like, well, that's beyond, it's almost like that's beyond my pay grade, as it were, to kind of like to get into that murky void there. But if my manager or the organization is not supporting by giving some directionality, manager's got three options. I'm sure there's others, but these are three options. You've got, you could just wait. Just tell the team, well, I'm sure something will crop up. I'm sure that the organization will tell us something at some point. It's one option. I don't think that's a great option. The next one is flag up, actually communicate up to your manager. Look, we're having real problems around this, and we don't know about that. Can you give us a guidance? Can you give us a steer? What is the decision? What's being said about, the 6 months? What are the plans? What's being spoken about at senior management level? Tell us, give us some information. So that's okay. That's a kind of a next step. But actually the reality is, within as much as you possibly can, I encourage managers to just step up. And to kind of fill the void. If your manager's not giving you information, then you need to step up. So there's a maverick approach to this, which is just like, I go, right, well, if I'm not getting a decision on this, we're going to make a decision. Okay, that's the maverick approach. You've also got, so that's the I can until I'm told I can't. Does that make sense? I can until I'm told I can't. Still somebody goes, hang on a minute, what are you doing? The opposite end of that is I can't until I'm told I can. So, which, apologies, Simon, this is nothing directed at you, but I used to find was a bit of a thing that happened in some local authorities. Okay, I'm not suggesting that happens in yours. I'm sorry, we can't do that because we haven't yet been told that we can. But that obviously just holds everything up as well. Those are two ends of a polarity. If we've got somewhere in the middle, which is okay, let's make a decision on what is it that we feel we could do, should do, what's the directionality we're going to take until we're told otherwise. Research it, think it through, come up with best decision as a team perhaps. Then flag that up to your manager. So you're still communicating, over the next 3 weeks, this is what we're intending on doing. If the manager doesn't like that, then they can come back to you and kind of go, no, and then so you'll have to pull them, grab them in and have a conversation with them. Otherwise, if you don't hear back from them, and it's kind of, if I don't hear from you by Friday, then this is what we're doing next week. Then continue on. At least you flag that up, and then keep your manager in the loop by actually saying, we are doing this, we're delivering on that, this is working, that's, we've changed this, we've done that. Just keep communicating, just email, keep communicating with them to tell them what you're doing as a team. That is stepping up and fulfilling that space there. But that's the nature of ambiguity, is you either sit in the passenger seat and wait, or you get in the driving seat and go, okay, what are we going to do? And let's keep communicating upwards just to let them know that's what we're doing. It doesn't answer all questions, and I'm sure this is something we could also talk around and about for a whole nother session. But do those two things make sense? Cool? It's very good. Okay. Now, what I did want to pick up on, a couple of tips, things I found. Oh, by the way, right near the beginning of my career of running training courses, etc., I had the, I'm going to say the kind of the privilege, in a weird kind of way, of observing nearly 100 hours of what were called pre-disciplinary one-to-ones. Okay, this was in a training capacity, but some managers were brilliant. They really were able to have a conversation, a difficult conversation. They were able to keep it on track and get from A to B. So there was an agreement at the end, which is what all managers want to be able to do. Nobody likes, well, let's say nobody, most people don't like having that kind of conversation with others. So it's about how to, it was almost as if the job of the member of staff was to take the whole thing sideways. It was like a game of chess where the manager's sitting here and the individual's sitting there rather than opposite. So the manager's trying to go that way and the other one's going, pushing it sideways through things like what I call defenses. So just psychological defenses like, no, I didn't, it wasn't me, it's not my fault, it's them, you're picking on me, you know, I'm so stressed, you know, etc. So there's all these kind of things that can be, and what was happening, some managers were kind of following that going, oh dear, that's very terrible, and kind of going down a hole somewhere, and then the conversation just went sideways and didn't complete itself, or it just kind of got stuck. Whereas the good managers were able to take the sideways move and just kind of go, whoa, and bring it back online again. So that was a bit that I wanted to share with you in a short while, because that was quite a useful modeling experience for me at the very beginning of my career in terms of seeing that happening. But here was the other one, and it took me a few years to just nail this one right down. And it's where managers sometimes want to give feedback. And this is all part of performance and behavior as well, which sometimes perhaps if someone's remotely working, behavior is slightly less of an issue, but it could still be. In terms of if they're dealing with customers or emailing other people, for example. And it is the difference trying to give feedback on attitude. When a manager tries to give feedback, or actually this could be with your kids, or this could be just life, you try and give feedback on attitude. So that would be, for example, where a manager might say to the individual that, the problem is you're being quite negative. Or, the problem is you're being you're being a bit aggressive. Any of that word, where there's the word being that can be put in front of it, that indicates an attitude. But an attitude is an internal thing, actually. And when we say you're being negative, being whatever, even if it's like being friendly, it could be a positive version, you are mind reading. Because an attitude is an internal thing. And it took me a while to get it to this simplicity. And of course, as soon as we get to the degrees of simplicity, something will break down. However, this will do for now as a rule of thumb. The question is, what are they doing? That brings you back to behavior. If you talk about what they're being, they're being lazy, being something or the other, then we're still in the realms of attitude. What are they doing? What's the behavior? What are they doing which gives you the indication that they're being that? So, for example, if someone's being negative, well, what are they doing? What are the behavior that they're doing which gives you the clue that they're being negative? The behavior is the bit that you've got to do the feedback on, because when you're doing feedback, whether it's about behavior or performance, it's got to be measurable. It's got to be evidence-based. It's got to be incontrovertible, non-arguable. It's happened. I've seen it happen. Which, by the way, I've also stuck in the handout a little bit about hearsay, which is a whole kind of another rabbit hole sideways, which is about when somebody within the team goes, Fred's been, what are they like? Or Fred's been really, calling me love, or Fred's been asking me to do his photocopying for him, it's one of these things where it's like, Fred's been doing this, Fred's been doing that. But if the manager hasn't seen it, they're in a hearsay situation, and that can be problematic as well. So what I've done within that is just given a whole bunch of examples of things you can do. There's no one way, I haven't yet found perfectly of dealing with hearsay. First step is always going to be gather as much information from the complainant as possible, which is going to be, okay, so when did it happen? Where did it happen? What specifically was said or done? Was there anybody else there? How often has it happened? You just ask lots of those kind of questions to try and gain a picture of what's happened. And then as a manager, you've got a variety of different things. You go into what's called wait and see. So you just kind of keep your ears open or eyes open. Or, you know, if there's any evidence or if anyone else sees it, then it's corroboration. You go and talk to them. If it's a serious accusation, then obviously that goes into policy, HR policy at that point within the organization, escalation potentially, or chat to HR. Etc., etc. So there's no perfect one way of dealing with that, but it illustrates why it's so important. If you're going to have a conversation with somebody about performance or behavior, you've got to start with something as concrete as possible. And hence, if somebody is performing virtually or performing, working at home, that's why you've got to set the flag in the sand to start with about what are we agreeing? What's our agreement now in terms of performance? What can you deliver? What is reasonable? And then you're kind of measuring against that so that you've got something concrete. As soon as it gets fuzzy, that's where managing performance and giving feedback, giving feedback becomes challenging, if not almost impossible. So I just wanted to pick up. So it's the doing versus being. Nice and simple, but kind of golden rule, if you like, for managers. I've also put in there about the nature of empathy. I think sometimes for a manager, if somebody's, just dipping in for a moment into the challenging performance or performance that's not happening, missing performance, the performance that's not, the person's not delivering for whatever reason, maybe we don't even know in the first instance. The empathy bit. If somebody's behavior is a bit off or their performance is they're just not delivering on something, it's feasible as a manager that you can get kind of frustrated with that. If you then have a one-to-one with somebody, either face-to-face or Zoom or on the phone, do not do this by email, please. Then, it's going to be, if you're frustrated already, we take that into the meeting. And it's what's called psychological leakage, which is not a nice term, but you get the idea. It's where that frustration is going to come through, and then there's potentially, it creates a kind of more of a tension than you need. So there's the question of, even if you're irritated with somebody, annoyed with somebody, frustrated with somebody, how do you step back from that? And there's just a few examples. I love phrases like, okay, first of all, are they difficult, or is their behavior difficult, or are they different? Different culture, different personality style, have different approaches, different behaviors, which is okay, not okay in different circumstances, or deemed to be. We've then got, I love this one, a difficult person is a person in difficulty. Now the idea with that one, whether you agree with it or not, a difficult person, we can all be difficult people, I'm sure, particularly in this weather. We could all be a bit awkward, a bit kind of like frustrated. So, but if most of us, I think anyway, if we're going to be difficult, it's just that moment in time. But why? Because something's happened, or something hasn't happened, or something stopped us from doing something, and so we've got frustrated and upset and etc. around that one. So we are in difficulty. So the idea, okay, cool, I'm going to come back to that. So thank you for the line on the chat. That's a good starting point. The reason for all of that, you're more likely to want to help a person in difficulty than you are a difficult person. But what if they're one and the same? Also came across a phrase, and I don't know why I certainly, if I'd seen it, I hadn't picked it up consciously just recently. And it perhaps goes a little bit kind of beyond what we're talking about here, but is hurt people hurt people. Apparently the first, I was looking that up, sort of who came up, must have been a psychotherapist came up with that one, and apparently it was 1959 in an American PTA kind of school meeting or something, and they were talking about behaviors and bullying. Even back then, this was in America, and then someone actually came up with that, and it was reported in the local newspaper. So people that are feeling hurt then tend to potentially lash out. Not always, but I like that phrase. Anywho, perhaps that's an aside for now. Difficult person is a person in difficulty. So what is their challenge? What's gone on for them? What has happened? Why? People don't just randomly behave. Something's happened. And I think it's quite useful for if it's a change in behavior or a change in performance. And of course, we're in this weird world at the moment, but if there's a sort of a shift or a change and something's not, that's a really useful thing, I think, because then you can actually say, this is not like you, or this is not the you I know. And it's a kind of quite an empathetic way of moving a conversation on. But coming back to the chat we have, I notice and I wonder are good starting points. So particularly notice, I think, is a good, because it's something you've observed. wonder is obviously what you're thinking about, which is fine as well. I've noticed that, over the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I've noticed that. Label the behavior or the performance. What are you seeing? Put the evidence on the table. Then if it's different to their normal behavior or performance, so then it's like, this is not like you, what's happened? You're trying to move the conversation on at that point. So you've got in the handout as well, I'll put it up here. I'm going to open back up for conversation in a short while. I just wanted to get this bit in there, and then we will open it up to all the other eventualities. So the model that we ended up with, which is a little bit of a loose model to some extent, however, I'll explain it as we go. His first step is clarify. Why are we having the conversation? So this, again, remember, is about if performance or behavior is not where it should be. So that's clarified. I've noticed that, or are you aware that? And then, if this is not like you, da, da, da. If, however, it is like them, if, perhaps you've inherited them, you're a manager, you've inherited somebody, the interesting person who gets kind of moved around the organization, or you've taken over a team, you're kind of new manager, and then you've got this individual that you've inherited. So this is the challenging bit as well, is help them acknowledge. Help them acknowledge that there is an issue. So there's different versions of this one. Is by you explaining it in the first instance, do they kind of go, yeah, fair enough, I see what you mean. Great. If they do, we can move it on to the next phase. If they will not, if they kind of go, no, don't see what you mean there. No, previous manager didn't mind me doing that. No, they never said anything. And then there's all these kind of defenses start kicking in. Then at that point, you've got, okay, that may be the case. But can you see, this next one is, can you see how other people are affected by what you're doing or not doing? So go for the ripple effect, go for the impact statement. If they still will not see that, no, everybody loves me, and no, nobody has a problem with me, then unfortunately you just have to go with the, okay, I know that it is having an impact on other people. There's been, even if there was complaints made or whatever, so be it. But I'm telling you there is an issue. This is where I need you to be, and this is where you are right now. So you just have to kind of be a bit more blatant with that one. And then we're into the next phase, which is analyze. Explore is a much better word, but then the model doesn't work. That's the change model. Analyze. So what's happened? What's going on? This is the opportunity to really get to the welfare aspect of it. The underlying issues, potentially what's going on. So you're in kind of empathy mode right now, having that conversation, trying to find out more. Sometimes people will tell you, but as Jan said earlier on, sometimes they might not. Sometimes people will even say, yeah, there is a problem, but I don't want to talk about it. Which is like, okay, you can't make somebody talk about an issue that they've got. I think, however, as a manager, you've still got to move the conversation on. You can't treat that as a dead end or a full stop in the conversation. You've come this far. So the bit then is going to be, okay, I appreciate you don't want to talk about it. Can you just tell me, though, top level here, I appreciate you don't want to tell me the details, is this work related or outside of work? If it's work related, then who else will you talk to? Because it's like, well, if it's work related, then they need to talk to someone about it, even if it's the employee assistance program, or your manager or a different person again. Yes, thank you. So sometimes it's also about being the right person to talk to the person. Obviously, if you're their manager, then that's the first instance you will be. But you're absolutely right. There's going to be the who will they talk to? If it's outside of work, then are you getting help? Are you getting support? Are you getting help? Again, give them the employee assistance. If you've got it, give them a kind of a counselling line number. I don't know, the Samaritans. If your company hasn't got an employee assistance program, then see who else could you refer them to so that they can talk to somebody, or are they getting support? Are they getting help with whatever it is that they won't tell you about? Because you've still got to get to this bit of the need rather. What is the need or the standard? What is it you need from them? If they've slipped below, then what is the standard? Where do you need them to be? My apologies, I have another meeting. Okay, cool. See ya, Ivy. Bye, nice to see ya. So yeah, what do you need? What is the standard? What is that? Where do you need them? What is be clear? Clarity about this is either this is what we agreed, if it's kind of online and, virtual training, virtual management, what we agreed was that you would deliver X, Y, Z, and you're kind of like right down here somewhere. So, what I need from you is, and then get agreements. So as if it's kind of really from like a meeting at this point onwards, agreement to action, and then evaluate or review. That's an agreed date. Now, as far as I'm concerned, that fits with pretty much most. I've had many HR folk on courses with me over the years, and they've kind of been happy with that. Obviously it depends on how one goes about this, what one says during this conversation. If the person opens up here, well then, can you do something about it? Here's a kind of an extra bit that goes with that, which is somewhere in the handout as well. Let's say you are exploring it and they're going to go, oh, this is what's going on for me, or that's what's going on for me. As a manager, you've really only got a set of options. And if we kind of go up to, where should we go? Up to here. So the acronym for this one, by the way, if you're not a trainer or learning and development, you wonder why they're always, like it's got to be an acronym of some sort. Basically, this is what we do when we're back in the real world of normality. This is what trainers do when they're sitting in the Premier Inn in the evening between running, day 1 and day 2 of a training course, staring at the wall of the Premier Inn, and we go, oh, I know what would be a good acronym. That's basically what we do of an evening. That's welcome to the world of a learning and development professional in the evening. Okay, what can we do? Can we actually do something about it? In fact, let me coach them. Sorry, can we coach them to resolve the situation for themselves? So coaching them, that's a classic kind of more and more managers expected to be coaching people now, coaching approach, coaching style, even and can bring training into that as well. So not just the non-directive coaching, but also kind of like, well, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Having a conversation to help them resolve it. Another one might be act. Is there something you can do to support them, help them to, it might be that it's workload, overload. That's going to be a classic. Okay, well, look, let's take this off of you for now, focus in on this. I guess coaching could be back to prioritizing, reprioritizing, but act. Is there something, this is the reasonable adjustments bit that we were talking about earlier on. Can you remove something, add something, change something to support them, help them? Refer is another one. And I think all good managers need a kind of a little book of referral places, which could be your employee assistance program. But if someone's not well, it's like, okay, look, I know this is difficult time and no one really wants to be going to doctors and hospitals, but there's phone numbers to phone, and you need to contact, contact the NHS, contact whoever. Normally, if we were kind of in normal world, I go and see your GP. So referral could also be, who else could we, I guess, used to be, relate if it's relationship issues. Citizens Advice Bureau, I think they're kind of around and about here and there. That's another option. If there's no employee assistance program, to try and get some ideas on what could they do from an economic worry, financial worries, etc. And then finally, escalate, which would be for the really, oh boy, that's someone's accusing someone of victimization, bullying, harassment, discrimination, prejudice. It's suddenly an HR policy kicks in at that point. Then escalation to sort of go, okay, I need to find out more about that and have a chat with HR, for example. I guess it could, if it was an organizational thing that was to do with something going on higher up in the organization, that could be escalated to your manager. If it's about process or something that's getting in the way or getting blocked, or supplier issue or something like that, that could be an escalate as well. But basically, with all the potential causes of issues and challenging things that people have in their lives, as a manager, and we're wanting to kind of just bring this back to almost like the minimal things that I need to think about as a manager, because I've got a job to do as well. And so there's kind of the idea of, do I need to coach them? Can I take action to deal with this situation, remove something, do something? Who can I refer them to? Or alternatively, ooh, this is a serious one, we need to escalate this. And by the way, I like the idea as a manager, if somebody does open up, that you are a support, but you are not a crutch for that person. I've heard of too many stories, and this is in the past, of a member of the team turning up on a manager's doorstep in the evening or on a Sunday afternoon in tears, that's probably gone a little bit too far at that point. You can kind of counsel and coach, but not be their counselor. You are not their therapist. I know this sounds obvious, but there's a kind of a fine line sometimes. If someone's in a less than good place and you really feel for them, your heart is with them because you can see how much they're struggling, and you're kind of almost taking that home with you yourself, or you're kind of thinking about it later on, and that's okay. But if they're phoning you up in the evening, as I say, or kind of wanting to talk to you at all different hours, or phoning you up in the middle of the night, it's probably gotten too far at that point. You need to kind of step back. Okay, what you've also got in the handout is a whole bunch of the defenses, which are fun. But we can either talk about them or not talk about them. You've got them on the handout. But what I wanted to do again was come back to you. I think at this point, is there anything else on the, okay, Anya's heading off as well, or gone. And have a clash, Terry's clash. Lots of people clashing at 11 and disappearing. Stay with me, somebody. Sally, stay with me. Anywho, okay, yeah, so there's no other questions down the side at the moment. So either, I'm going to kind of go what I call open frame for a moment. Observations, questions, comments, revelations, talk to me. If not, then what we'll do is we'll go back into mini groups. NASA.
That's really interesting. Thanks, Joe. Perhaps the question really is, with the uncertainty for management roles, the stress that the directors and owners of businesses, both micro, small, and medium enterprises in particular.
Yep.
Now, there seems to be quite a heavy, duty on employee well-being, but ultimately, the well-being of the directors and senior management team,
yeah,
is almost more critical than the employees' well-being, because they need to be in a really good mental place despite everything else that's going on around them to make good judgments. I mean, how does that fit, and how does that relate, Joe?
So first of all, I like your little kind of slightly red flag there about in terms of whose well-being matters most. I think that's a real interesting paradoxical conversation in terms of depending on which way you view the organisation as to who makes what happen. But I do get from a leadership perspective, you have more impact across the organisation and down through the hierarchy, if you like, the triangle of the organisation. So I think I understand from that perspective. I would hope that everybody's well-being actually is equally valid and essential within that. But again, starting with the frame of the day-to-day, the scope, as it were, was about managers. That was what we're talking about. As a manager, you cannot be responsible for the well-being of your own manager. You can support and help and be nice and deliver and do what you can. And I'm not being silly. This bit about stepping up sometimes is a really useful thing for your manager. If I can remember them, I have 3 F's that managers need from a manager here. One of them is fulfill, to step up, fulfill that space. One of them is forecast, kind of start thinking about the future. So Nasa, you said about that, what's happening next? Where are we going? What's happening? And the other one is will come back to me. I love having 3 F's and then only remembering 2. That's just like to keep you curious and keep you online. So if someone else says I have to go now, oh, you're going to miss the 3rd F. It will come back to me. Fun. That'll do for now. Thank you, Sally. Yes, okay, and there's the kind of thing about, yes, it starts at the top. Yes, I do. There is that ripple effect down. My kind of something inside of me is also about if the needs of and this comes back to the needs-based leadership thing, if the needs of up here, senior management or business owners, if the needs become more important than the needs of the staff, that for me is that kind of just creates ructions. And I think that's probably just an interpretation rather than you know, that yes, these people up here are more important than those people here. I know that's not what you meant, but it does. Yeah, okay, it starts at the top as well. Feedback's good. I like this. You're developing your own Fs here. Very cool. So yes, fair enough. So in terms of, well, that doesn't answer your question, Naz, does it? Because I'm kind of coming at it from this angle. So
it does actually, Joe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I think that is key. I mean, as it says, you know, as I've always said, with all the businesses I work with, and unfortunately I've been working with businesses that have had to mothball and look at restarting in January, and also I've worked with businesses that have just laid off all their staff because all their orders have dried up because of the industry they're in. But it is across the board, and I think you're actually spot on. So thank you for that.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I would add actually that what I found with the more senior leaders I'm working with, my job has kind of changed to become much more of a personal support and confidant to those people. I've seen that happen over the last few months because the top people do need support and they can't get it always because they're managing, you know, they are hiding a level of uncertainty from their staff quite often.
Yes. And
they don't want to pass on that pressure. So I think having an external person is quite a good idea for them. But then I would say that.
And so would I. We're in kind of like, that's part of our Venn diagram of crossover at that point.
But I've seen that happen over the last few months. Their needs have changed.
Yes. Yeah. Agreed. And again, I think that's during good times, then people don't bother about it too much. But I think you're absolutely right. The people who are here in the organization, the business owners, the people at the top, again, do they have shareholders that they're kind of almost responsible to as well? Or is it just a family run business that it's up to us? But them getting support from external, from somebody who can mentor, or either, you know, mentor and or coach them from the outside. Because yes, being CEO is the loneliest job, of course. And by the way, something that also I've become aware of over time is that as people get promoted in an organization, depending on the size of the organization as well, and whether it's multinational, the further you go, the lonelier it gets. And I think sometimes people are at this level and they get quite a lot of support, and then they go to the next level and it's like, hello, is there anybody there? And there's this suddenly again, the void above, but they don't know that they now have a new duty to step up and do the other third F. What else? Yes, Laura.
So I was in NAS's group actually at the start, and kind of feeds into that economic worries, but I think it also fits in really well here in terms of those different managers. Is that kind of awareness that so many different people have got a different sense of how long this impact is going to be, or how long we might be working with this. I've got junior staff members who are swallowing everything on social media, as it were, and it'll be okay by Christmas, this is temporary. Whereas actually, as a manager, and I'm at St. Catherine's, so we're a frontline organisation, the impact for us is years, if not decades, as it is for many businesses. And we're all kind of working with a slightly different understanding of that. And I guess it kind of feeds, I guess you sort of covered that a bit with the ambiguity training. But I'm really conscious of that, and that kind of different people having a different level of understanding and how that is impacting their performance and well-being, and what we can do in that space.
Yeah, again, we come back to how well are the people at the higher end, top end of the organization, how well are they communicating messages, you know, in terms of this is where we see, you know, this is what we're looking to, this is what we believe could be happening over the next period of time. And also just saying, you know, this is, if people at the top of the organization are actually saying, you know, briefing messages, even a video from the chief exec from time to time is fine. They don't, you know, either a Zoom, what do they call it, town hall, or it's kind of, I think it's town hall, something like that, where it's kind of chief exec speaks and everyone can come online if they want to, or a video or something to just say, this is going to affect us over a long period of time. You know, to be brutal about it, but be honest about it. But also say, you know, that we don't know exactly what's going to happen. The Bank of England can't predict exactly what's going to happen. I would say the government can't predict, but let's come back to the Bank of England, can't predict exactly what's going to happen. So it is, The future is always going to be that way, but at the moment it feels even more chaotic than it normally is. But just to say that as well, we are in chaotic times, and it's likely that the chaos will continue for some period of time. Our plans are currently, and just say this is where we're up to at the moment. And then I think for senior leadership, chief exec, if they're going to do this video or an announcement of some sort, or just briefly an update, kind of monthly, weekly, bi-weekly, whatever, is there something in there about, this is where we are, this is what we're planning for at the moment, for over the next year or the next 2 years, we're planning to do X, Y, Z, but that may change depending on what now happens. So it's, be honest, that's this meta communication thing again. Decide something as a leader, but also communicate that we may need to redecide depending on what happens next. So that it doesn't look to people, it's like, good, we've got directionality, but if you then change it in 3 weeks' time, as we said, things change, so therefore we need to, redecide on that. It doesn't look as if you're changing your mind or flip-flopping around. Oh, go on, Laura.
Oh, no, I'm just agreeing with you. I think we fortunately have been doing that very well, and cool. We've constantly said this is the plan as of today, but it might change. Actually, at crisis point, I had someone asked me on the Thursday what the priority was for the Monday, and I said I'm not wasting either of our time talking about that now. Like, with kindness, we'll talk about that on Monday. I said, in normal circumstances, absolutely, we'd be planning that, but too much is going to change in these 4 days. Cover it then.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And again, as is coming up alongside, even if nothing new to say, it's best to keep informing. Visibility is so critical for people. But one of the things, Steve will know this one, the CIPD, Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development, they said kind of like quite some time ago, everything's digital till the end of this year. Whereas a lot of other organisations are going, oh yes, we'll have training again. We'll be back in the room by July, by August, by September. Yes, this will be fine. We'll all be back to normal. The CIPD, which I actually think, often people in organisations look to HR to give us answers. If senior management aren't giving us answers, let's go to HR. They must know. They're the people. They know what's going on. Because they're in the same boat. But I think the CIPD have been pretty good, and there's I don't know how much you can access as a non-member, but in terms of their updates and websites, website aspects of things. However, as I say, they were way ahead of the game in terms of nothing. I mean, I've been getting bookings now for end of September, October to go back into spaces, which to me is like, oh, that's interesting that people are now kind of wanting to move. And this is care home environments as well, which is even more interesting. Again, there'll be different industries will be hit in different ways. Some industries will still continue on. Some will still be needed exactly the way they've always been needed. They may kind of find that their profits are down a little bit. The supermarket industry, that's not my speciality. I have worked with retail in the past. The supermarket particularly, people will still need food, even if they're not buying the luxury items as much. They'll still need the fundamentals. Care homes, will still need to care for, there'll still be lots of people that will need care. So there's going to be some industries. I have a vision of what may well happen next, and of course it could be completely wrong because I don't know anything more about the future than anyone else does. But I do read New Scientist, so I do like New Scientist, by the way. I think it's a great magazine for just getting a bit of a sense of what might come. I don't know why I'm turning the page. I'm going to get you to hallucinate. I'm not going to write on here. I think that as we go forward into the future, yes, there may be some big organisations may either just go, or they may even disappear. Small businesses, there'll be a lot of small businesses that will be impacted as well. However, I think the resilience within, let's take the airplane industry. Gatwick, for example, was it Virgin and was it British Airways that pulled out? We're not doing Gatwick anymore. Almost immediately, there was another air company kind of like were there, and I think there is some kind of strange resilience that even if things come down, there will be quite a quick rebuilding of something. And the metaphor that's used sometimes is out in the bush, the fire, as it were, that kind of just clears everything, and then you get these shoots start coming through. But that will take time. That will take time. I think there's going to be a lot of people probably doing self-employed for a while, and then kind of when the marketplace comes back up again, they'll be like, oh, I'm going back to being employed again. I'm not keen on this self-employed thing. Some people might like the self-employed thing, so there'll be all these little businesses that that people will see. And there will, of course, be a lot of people that will be unemployed and looking for work as well. And, you know, anything that all of us can do to help one another, I think, becomes your network at that point. That's a whole nother, we're really into a whole nother session right now, but this is where Gatwick Diamond, as an example, LinkedIn, etc., is a place to, or those two places, to start creating a network of people that you know, to increase your chances. You know, I love the idea that luck is that point, the crossroads of opportunity and readiness. I love that idea. It's that kind of the crossroads of opportunity and readiness. Because often there are opportunities arise, but we just don't see them because we're not ready for them. And networking is part of doing both. I think networking helps to extend our readiness, get ourselves ready, get your LinkedIn profile up. That's the other thing I would seriously, as a manager, that's the other thing I'd be telling people to do, is like, if things are beginning to look a bit unstable or iffy, is like, get your LinkedIn profile up to date. Start linking in with people right now. The best time to start building your network actually is when you're employed. The best time to look for other jobs is when you're employed. When you've still got that kind of, even if there's a kind of a bit of a cliff edge feel to what could be coming next, you're in a slightly kind of better position. Don't wait. If you're going to start your own business up or thinking about starting a business, start setting up the website, get on LinkedIn, start that all now, so that when the cliff edge moment happens, you're ready to roll. You've got a sense of who might be out there. You've already started making contacts with people. You're networking. You've got your website ready to roll. It's there. You know, rather than so many people just wait until the cliff edge moment, and then they kind of go, oh, hello, Monday morning, I suppose I ought to start a business now. Well, it doesn't work. That, you know, that's fine, but you're going to have a huge gap in between again. You know, do what you can. And I think if you as a manager can find where is their support, how do people, what grants are available? You know, I know that's not really your job as a manager, but if you can find some of those things, or even point them in a direction of websites, etc., or as I say, if you've got employee assistance program that can help people in that direction, great. But just, you know, at this point in time, if part of the role of being a manager is to meet the needs of yourself, the organization, but your team, well then, if that's what they need, then your kind of job description in your mind is going to need to change a little bit. To help support people. That's your choice. You know, as a manager, that's totally a manager's choice. And I think if you told managers within your company, right, you're now going to have to be employment people. You know, you're now going to have to tell people how to do their CVs and their, you know, how to perform well at interviews. They'd be like, get off, that's not my job. Some of them anyway would do that. But I think a compassionate manager I think that's a good thing to do for people. Support them in any way, shape or form you can, rather than just dump them. What else? What other kind of questions, observations? We started with, where did we start? People wanting to come back, the mental health aspect, economic worries. Yes, so we've sort of talked around some of those things within the embedded nature of what we've been talking about. I tell you what, if there aren't any specific questions right now, can I just give you a couple of tips around dealing with defensiveness? I know this is we're kind of working within an extraordinary context in the terms of there's so many things directions we could go. But if I can bring it back to the original scope and theme of this specific session about managing performance, well, you know, what if you're trying to give someone feedback, you're trying to have a conversation with them and they're batting stuff back at you again? That's difficult. So the final page in the handout, which has just got some ideas. So let me remind myself of some of them, which I printed off. So we've got, let's pick some interesting, blame, that's an interesting one, where they just sort of blame someone else. Or they blame you, which is always an interesting one. There's the manager sort of going, look, your performance, oh, you know, that, and you haven't, and I've noticed that, and this doesn't measure to, you know, and I really need you to, and then they're going, well, you know, how am I meant to deliver that when you keep doing X, Y, Z? And they just push the whole thing back onto the manager, which is a really interesting one, by the way, because if you're not careful, the whole conversation goes 180, and it's like they're reviewing you in 3 weeks' time as to your performance and how well you're doing it. It all goes horribly wrong at that point. So just, you know, there's plenty of ways of dealing with that. But I think one of them is actually pull, ask for more information. What do you mean? So what is it that's happened? What is it that's changed that causes you to feel that way or to think that way? But here's the big question: why didn't you tell me sooner? And going forward, if there is an issue like that, talk to me. Tell me sooner. Otherwise, I can't do anything about it. If it is me, if it's something I've done, I've loaded you up with some extra something, or I haven't heard you on something or the other, or you got another project running, or whatever it might be. Okay, fair enough. But let's talk. Otherwise, I can't help you on that one. If it's to do with another department, then you may have to be kind of, okay, well, I'll have a chat with them and see what we can do, or coach the individual to deal with it themselves. We've also got, the other one, which I think is a real red flag one again, is the victim one, which could be, it's like you're picking on me. It could be you're picking on me. Other people are doing that, whatever it is that you're telling them that they're doing or not doing. And if you've got that, it's like that may well be the case, and I will be talking to them separately. But right now, you and I are having this conversation. Just bring it back. Here's the real red flag: is you're picking on me because I'm ... Now there could be accusing the manager of sexism, racism, homophobia, whatever. I don't know. It could be a range of different things, because I'm too tall, short, whatever. Well, the challenge with this one is that if you say, what do you mean? You could be opening up a can of worms that may or may not exist. It might be that it could be being used at that point as a reactive thing, or it could be that the person feels that way. But this is actually really not the right time to open that can of worms. The way to handle it at that moment in time is just say, I would be talking to anybody whose performance was here, or I'd be talking to anybody that was swearing at customers on the phone. Does that make sense? Just bring it back to the original thing that you were having the conversation with them about. Then afterwards, if you think, oh my God, that was really shocking, I had no idea they felt that way, have a chat with HR or your HR rep, and just go, look, what do I do? Because it may be you'll want to go back to that person and say, look, I'm really concerned. There's something that you said the other day in the meeting, and I'm really concerned if you really feel that way. Because at that point, they can either kind of go, oh, it was just the heat of the moment, in which case, okay, cool, fair enough, I'm pleased about that. But, let's keep talking. Let's just keep talking and make this easy. If, however, they say, no, I think there is an issue, then it's policy time. There could be that they've got a grievance. It could be who knows what. It may not be you necessarily. It might be someone else, or senior management, or just the general feel of what's going on, glass ceilings, etc. But it's a real tricky one, that one. And I think, honestly, the best way to handle that is just bring it straight back to, I'd be having a conversation with anybody that did X. Then that helps you refocus. Another one is silence. Interesting one, where the other person just stares at you. So you're trying to have a conversation with them, and they just, you've got different types of silence. There's, let's go with there's what I call the silence before the tears. This is where we've gone psychologically, and I have this, sometimes if I'm trying to kind of having a difficult conversation not in a work context, I've yet to have that, but certainly in a kind of personal environment, where I just don't know what to say. I'm trying to find words and they're not there, and it's like, it's just emotions are going around in my head. Maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm revealing too much, and we're recording. But there's that kind of point of, some people sort of say that if they get angry, they end up, tears come, and how frustrating that can be. And it's just a kind of a rewiring of emotions at that particular point. Anywho, so sometimes the silence is they can't find words, but you can see that. You can see their faces searching for something, and often the eyes glaze a little bit as well before tears come. However, the interesting one is the silence, the deadly silence, the silence that's got attitude in it. I said don't be commenting on attitude, obviously, but where they do, that one, where it's just that awkwardness, that kind of where they say so much without saying anything at all. And again, how you deal with that one, I think it could be, if what they're doing right now is an example of what you're talking about, then say so. What you're doing right now, you're staring at me, you're not engaging with me. This is an example of what I'm talking about. And if they simply won't communicate with you, then you have to bring it back to, if they will not do this, but if this is stary, then you've still got to end the conversation with, okay, if you don't want to talk to me, or if you won't talk to me right now, then I'm going to suggest we bring this to a close. But what I need to remind you is I need you to be up here. We'll review, we'll talk again tomorrow, we'll review again at the end of the week. That's all you can do at that moment in time. If someone will not talk to you, then you may need to get someone else involved in that process, or have a chat with that. That's always my get out line, by the way, from learning and development. I always end up going, and if in doubt, have a chat with HR.
Oh, thanks.
Steve likes that. That's good.
Yeah, Joe, one of your scenarios there reminds me of the Games People Play book, which is an old book now, but there's a lovely one there about treat me, don't beat me. So I've got all these things going on in my life. My husband's left me, and this is going on. As a lovely defensive strategy, which is about empathy and parking.
Yes.
And then bringing them back. But the silence before the tears I thought that was leading on to the treat me, don't beat me routine.
Oh, okay. Well, no, it could be. That could go. But there is just somebody just bursting into tears. That can be real tears. Oh God, this sounds dreadful, doesn't it? But that can be a real expression of emotion, or sometimes it could be utilised. That could be. All of the defences can be very natural, or they can be purposeful. But you've got to, as a manager, you've got to treat them always as natural. If someone bursts into tears, you've got to kind of go. Now, obviously, if you're remotely managing someone who bursts into tears, you can't give them a tissue, but be there. That's all you can do is just be. If someone cries, the answer is just be there with them. If you are in the room, then if you've got access to clean tissues, clean handkerchief, then pass that over. Obviously, don't be dragging something out that maybe not. I've
got the opposite response there. Whenever I've got people bursting into tears, this is HR, not L&D. See, I would always say, you need time to collect yourself now, so I'm going to give you some private time, and I leave the room immediately because I won't be exploited by it.
Okay, fair enough. No, that's okay. That's
always been my strategy.
Yeah, okay. No, that's cool. I like that as well. That's the whole point.
It's pathetic.
As long as you don't go, oh my God, you're crying. I think that's the thing. Is that give them opportunity to recompose themselves, by all means. Or it depends on the dynamic you have with them, the relationship you have with them as well, I think. But for me, if somebody has got an issue, there's something going on, they haven't spoken about it, and they burst into tears. For me, actually, I have part of my original training was in psychotherapy, so I guess I'm reasonably comfortable with that. So, but it's just like, oh, at last, there's a breakthrough. That means we now know there is an issue, and it's just like I can now be with them. And just kind of have that gentle conversation with them to, what's happened, what's going on, what's happened. But I also get what you're saying there, Steve, as well as like, okay, maybe we need to have a time out and come back to this later. That's cool as well.
Can I just ask, sorry, Joe, Steve, can I just ask a question there then? In the normal circumstances, if you're having that difficult conversation with somebody, you're in an office with them. Okay, in a remote situation, you're doing it over Zoom, and if you do the Steve, I'll give you some private time, and when you go back, they won't put your Zoom and they won't communicate. What do you do?
I would try and reconnect and make my best efforts, I think.
Because I think that's something that perhaps is totally different.
Yes. And potentially dangerous.
Yeah. And now, as I say, when I was running the remote team, slightly different because there was always more than one of them. So if one of them was having a wobbly, the other one was there with them on site. But now you've got people working on their own at home, sometimes living on their own. And I think that brings us back to some of the things we were talking about with mental health and stuff.
I think that's a really good point.
It's quite a different situation to something we're used to.
Point taken, and I think given that scenario, my reaction wouldn't be the one I described it before.
I'll let you off then. No,
it is different. You can leave somebody alone in a room and go back in 5 minutes. But yes, you're absolutely right. It is far more problematic to do that online.
The reason I ask is we've actually had this situation, nothing to do with work, but to do with an elderly neighbour who he's been very ill, people have been worried about him, can't go in and see him, but everyone's been ringing him up, and he's been getting really stoppy and saying, I just don't want to talk to anybody, and putting the phone down on everybody that's ringing him up. So it's quite a difficult thing to work out, how are we all going to do this? So yeah, it's just something that occurred to me.
Yes, thank you, Laura, got your message. So yes, and it's that time. I hope, so we'll end that on a cliffhanger. Different ways of dealing with situations. I love it. That's human beings. We couldn't possibly cover all human beings in all situations in 1.5 hours. It's just really what I wanted to do was throw some ideas in. You've got the handout, so there was a bit of push. Share some ideas with you, but also give an arena, a platform, an environment for people to kind of have discussions as to wherever it went. Honestly, I love that. That's kind of why I love doing these particular sessions. And when Sally allows me to do a session, that's what I want to do. I want to just provide a forum for that to take place. Okay, I'm seeing lots of people sort of saying they're going to need to leave now. So let's bring things to a close. Thank you very much indeed for playing and for joining us. And I hope it was useful in some way, shape or form. Join me on LinkedIn if you're not, or I'm going to sound like a TV presenter now, or wherever you like. I will see you again in some realm. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joe. That was great. Thanks ever so much.